What's good, YouTube? It's your boy, Blue Blood Sports TV, back at y'all with another one. So tonight, the longest reigning champion in the sport of boxing currently today lost his titles, that being Mr. Gary Russell Jr., featherweight superstar boxer. Gary Russell Jr., he took on Mark Magsayo tonight, defended his titles, and Gary Russell Jr., he came up short in his fight. But at the end of the day, I thought that Gary Russell clearly won this fight. Gary Russell, he suffered a arm injury in this fight. Okay, his right arm. Gary Russell was unable to use his right arm the entire night. Okay, and Gary Russell, he came up short. But I thought that it was a clear case where it seems like everybody wanted Mark Magsayo to win the fight. I thought Gary Russell clearly won the fight to me. Okay, Mark Magsayo, even though Gary Russell, he injured his shoulder in the fourth round. Okay, so Gary Russell is now 31 wins, 2 losses, no draws, 18 wins by way of knockout, 33 years of age, 5'4" with a 64-inch arm reach. This was Gary Russell's first fight in 2 years. Okay, last time he fought was King Tug Nyamba back in February of 2020. So with that said, Mark Magsayo, he gets a majority decision victory over Gary Russell Jr. Mark Magsayo is now 24 wins, no losses, no draws, 16 wins by way of knockout, 26 years of age, 5'6" with a 68-inch arm reach. He was much bigger than Gary Russell in the fight tonight. Okay, he was the aggressor, but Gary Russell injured his right shoulder in the fourth round. In the fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, and into the ninth round, 5 rounds in after injuring his right shoulder, clearly, he threw a right jab, and then he didn't throw another right hand for the rest of the fight. So for 5 straight rounds, he didn't even throw his right hand, and yet he was countering Mark Magsayo with the left hand. He was throwing combinations with one hand. Okay, he was changing levels, throwing hooks to the body, straight left hands to the body, countering, coming upstairs, making Mark Magsayo miss all night. But you had guys like Steve Farhood seeing Mark Magsayo winning in a landslide. Okay, he wasn't landing any punches. He was missing. Gary Russell was making him miss in the phone booth. Gary Russell was turning him around. Gary Russell was countering him all with one hand. Okay, Gary Russell didn't have a right hand. He couldn't use a jab. And the first thing they did after the fight was put up the jab stats. Of course, Gary Russell can't use his jab. Of course, the jab is going to be lopsided because Mark Magsayo threw 200 plus jabs to Gary Russell's 60 jabs because he couldn't use his right hand. And in a fight where he couldn't use his right hand, he still put on a masterclass performance in this fight. He showed his slickness, his defense ability. He fought on the back foot. He even backed Mark Magsayo up in the fight. He landed big, clean punches. You didn't see Mark Magsayo land more than 5 clean punches the entire night that got Gary Russell's attention. Now, he threw some nice hook to the body. Okay, he threw some nice uppercuts. He was countering Gary Russell at times. But it wasn't hard to counter a guy that was predictable because Gary Russell only had a left hand. Okay, now he's a southpaw, and Mark Magsayo clearly was the much bigger guy. Much bigger. He looked like he was 2 weight classes above Gary Russell Jr. And Gary Russell Jr. still was the more accurate fighter. Gary Russell Jr. still was the cleaner puncher. Okay, Gary Russell Jr. still had the edge in ring generalship, making Mark Magsayo miss the entire night. Okay, this is a boxing match. So yes, Mark Magsayo is a professional boxer. Okay, an undefeated professional boxer who is from the Philippines. He's a Manny Pacquiao fighter and trained by Freddie Roach. Okay, and so yes, Mark Magsayo is going to land punches, but did he land clean enough and often enough to take a title from a guy with with a right hand deficiency and was making you miss the entire night, was slipping underneath the punches, was turning you in the phone booth. Not to mention when he had both hands, he was clearly making Mark Magsayo miss when he had both hands in the first 3 rounds. Okay, it wasn't even close. And then as soon as he injured the right hand, the only reason it was close is because Gary Russell was predictable. I told you guys in my build-up that Mark Magsayo was going to get a lot of credit in this fight. I told you that it was going to be a split decision. But I thought it was going to be a split decision in favor of Gary Russell Jr. Now, Gary Russell, he struggled on the scale. He missed weight. He had to go back and make weight. Okay. Gary Russell had his father was barely in camp when he had injuries and he had some medical things and health issues he had to attend to. He lost his little brother. He hadn't been in the ring in 2 years. There was a lot playing against Gary Russell, and I told you guys his skill set, his technical prowess, his ring generalship, and his defense was going to be the reason why he was victorious. And I was 1,000% correct. The judges just missed a good fight, okay? They missed Gary Russell's ring generalship. They missed the fact that he was making a miss. You go back and watch the fight. Yes, Magsayo was aggressive. Yes, he was pressing the fight. But guess what? He was supposed to. He was the much bigger fighter in the ring, okay? Clearly the bigger fighter. He never hurt Gary Russell Jr. He never buzzed Gary Russell Jr. He didn't dominate the fight like Steve Farhood would lead you to believe that Magsayo won rounds 5 through 10, 5 through 11, and then he gave Gary Russell Jr. the 12th round, okay? When Gary Russell did, if you saw Gary Russell win the 12th round, then you should have saw him win 5 through 10, because he did the same thing in the 12th round that he did in rounds 5 through 10. He made Magsayo miss the entire night. He countered him the entire night. He was accurate with his punches, okay? He was slick in there with one hand, okay? And he's the champion. You got to take it from the champion. He didn't take it from Gary Russell Jr., and he was getting counted. And Gary Russell was the cleaner puncher, the more accurate puncher, okay? But it was abundantly clear from the beginning of the fight that they were leaning towards one side. They made that abundantly clear, okay, from the very beginning of the fight. And the size difference was definitely very noticeable. And yet Gary Russell overcame all of that and won the fight with a left hand. He used combinations to the body with one hand. Magsayo, he should have been dominant over a guy who hadn't been in the ring in 2 years, who's 33 years of age, who had everything against him, stacked against him outside the ring, and then inside the ring injures his right shoulder and can't use his right hand. And yet Magsayo wasn't landing any big clean punches. He was the much bigger guy. He should have been able to stop Gary Russell in that position, and he wasn't able to do so. But they were leaning towards Magsayo the entire night. It's unfortunate, okay, because Gary Russell outboxed this man with one hand, with one arm, okay? Put on a boxing clinic, was the slicker boxer. Landing combinations, straight left hands to the body, followed by left hooks, followed by straight left hands back up top. With one hand, pivoting, making him miss in the phone booth, changing directions on him, changing levels on him with one hand. And he didn't get enough credit for doing that. Of course, Magsayo is going to have the edge in the jab department when you got a guy who clearly is in the fight with one arm. From the 4th round, you can clearly see he was void of using his right arm. He actually had it hanging by his side a lot of times in the fight. And in the 11th round, I gave Magsayo the 11th round clearly because Gary Russell was fatiguing. As he should. He only had one hand, one arm. So he was predictable. Yet he was predictable, and Magsayo couldn't catch up to him. This is no slight to Magsayo. This is a slight to the judging system within the sport of boxing. And personal preferences within the sport of boxing. When you clearly looking at one guy putting on a masterclass performance with one arm, but he doesn't get credit for that. And he's the champion. You have to, whatever happened to you having to take the belt from the champion? He didn't take the belt from the champion. He was aggressive. He wasn't accurate. He wasn't landing big, clean punches. He never hurt Gary Russell Jr. He never had him in a compromised position. He never had him in trouble where you thought Gary Russell was on the verge of being stopped. And yet Gary Russell was predictable with one arm, his left arm. And yet he was landing the cleaner punches. He rocked Magsayo a few times with the straight left hand, and his left hand was predictable. You knew that's the only thing he had was his left hand and his legs. And yet he was slipping underneath the punches. He was countering Magsayo with the left hand. He was making him miss all night. He was making him miss on the ropes. He was making him miss in the center of the ring, and he didn't get enough credit for it. And it's a shame that you have a world champion in a position of Gary Russell Jr., and you take it from him. Because that's what happened tonight. They took it from Gary Russell Jr. because of personal preferences. Let's be clear. Gary Russell won this fight tonight. Was it the cleanest fight? Absolutely not, because Gary Russell only had one arm. But he should have got the benefit of the doubt being the champion and having one arm in the fight and making the other guy miss, and he was predictable the entire night. So Gary Russell said that he's going to check out his shoulder. He wants to have a rematch. Let's see how this unfolds and plays out. But that's all I got for y'all. Make sure you hit the like button. Drop a comment in the comment section. Let me know what y'all think. Y'all already know what it is. It's your boy Blue. Blue Blood Sports TV. Hate, like, comment, and subscribe. You haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button. Hit the like button. Hit the bell icon to get all the new notifications. Follow me on Instagram at Blue Blood Sports TV, all one word. Y'all already know what it is. Shout out to the entire LDBC. Shout out to New Media. Shout out to Black Media Row. Make sure you like and share these videos. That's all I got for y'all. Peace.